Hello, my name is Andrew, and thank you for joining me in my brief presentation on adaptive learning. So in this presentation, I'll be answering the question, what is adaptive learning? Looking at its impact on learning design, my rationale for choosing it as a focus for my research, its potential leverage in my own practice or professional setting, and looking at some further considerations for adaptive learning and its projection into the future. So what is adaptive learning? Well, the onset of the pandemic allowed institutions to continue to practice through the use of existing digital technologies. So that could be educational institutions and home study, and businesses who put their compliance training, in-house training online through quality learning management systems. So that was all around before, but it was incredibly bolstered by the pandemic and the need to do this on a global scale. So all that requires data, or we can collect data from those online learning events, if you like, and we can use computer artificial intelligent algorithms to analyze that data, and then that data can review itself in a kind of software intelligence network, if you like, and adapt the content, adapt bandwidth, strength, adapt anything really it's programmed to do to meet the emerging learning outcomes and learner needs. So it's a personalized tech-based teaching method. A student's performance and reactions to digital content can be analyzed in real time by the system and lessons or instruction modified based on that data. The model makes sure that the students have equal opportunities to succeed despite any differences in learning style, pace, and most importantly, learner preferences. So how does adaptive learning actually work? Well, it involves collecting data from a multitude of devices, multiple technologies, learning applications, and software, etc. This could include artificial intelligence, cloud-based servers, augmented and virtual reality, as well as collecting data from all these devices to lend itself to gamification and therefore education for the modern generation. So more specifically, these technologies, applications, and software produce big data that is dependent on a network. This network needs to be resilient and strong enough to cope with the processing of this data. But it's personalized data from a particular learner group, so it creates a layer of software intelligence or understanding. And at this layer of intelligence, the software watches the telemetry from the network infrastructure, in other words, watches the data. It can make decisions in real time based on what it's programmed to review and what your learner group is. And it lends itself really well to supporting adaptive learning applications that already exist. So why use it? Well, mobility is made possible by cloud-based technologies for both instructors and students. You can learn anywhere rather than a fixed timetable, or the constraints of the physical classroom no longer create barriers to learning. That can also be time constraints as well. So for adaptive learning to take hold, students must also be equipped with the right devices, so including tablets, smartphones, laptops, etc., which offer the flexibility to learn from anywhere, anytime. So my rationale for choosing it is I've been an educator for over 10 years, in the latter part of that getting into teaching, teacher training, which involved creating online courses. And I also had to adapt them to meet the needs of larger groups, smaller groups, groups from different backgrounds. So I'm very interested in technology that can do that for the instructor. I've been an examiner in my time, so proctoring for exams is something that adaptive learning can do because it can collect data and see how students respond to particular exam formats and change bandwidth strength. So if the whole nation is doing an online exam at the time, it can change that bandwidth strength in order to cope with that load. I've been using server cloud-based technology in my teaching for ages, such as the flipped classroom, where students review work prior to the classroom, upload it and bring it into the classroom for review as an open class. I've used mobile learning as well, such as Kahoot to review control practice activities that would be done with a worksheet normally, which were very effective. So this technology and using this technology is obviously something we've all wanted to do as educators, but it can be incredibly stressful and cause an overload for both the teacher and the students. So handing that automated system over to adaptive learning software network is incredibly appealing, I think, for the majority of educators throughout the world. So potential leverage in my own practice: by implementing web service in an adaptive learning environment, the reusability of the learning content can be ensured. That means lessons that are recorded and edited to become a quality kind of online event can be added to, so the learning outcomes can be increased and developed as we go along, whereas traditionally that lesson would have to be repeated over and over again. So this approach is based on reusable learning objectives, describing a learning process as a composition of emerging, if you like, learning goals. The potential for content creation means you can provide and filter content based on the learner's emerging needs and the themes he or she or they like to explore. Thus, content can be open, not fixed. Compliance training through LMS, learning management systems, can lead to time efficiency, level of engagement, business outcome, proficiency, and mastery, which might not be traditionally the case. We all know when you design a compliance training package, the majority of employees are probably just want to click through as quickly as possible. But if that could be adapted to meet the employees' preferences on how they like to receive it, perhaps they prefer bite-sized information on their mobile phone as opposed to peer work or reviewing articles. So the system can change itself to really meet the learning preferences of any end user. So with regards to further considerations, the exciting thing is looking online is that no one really can make the best predictions about where it's going to go, because it's kind of linked to artificial intelligence, because it reviews data within itself, that intelligent software layer. So the good thing is it can actually predict its own trends. For example, a move to M-learning, bandwidth can be changed or content can be changed if there's a sudden popularity or a move to M-learning, for example. But that's really just my clumsy attempt at thinking about what this can actually do, because it's going to adapt itself, which is the exciting thing, in that it becomes an automated process of differentiation, adapting, and then content that gets filtered to meet the learning needs, as opposed to the teacher doing that. So it's avoiding human error, which is great for education, that's dependent on the quality of the structure. So thinking about B.F. Skinner and his behavioralist kind of approach and his machine learning attempt in the analog days, really, this machine never really made it onto a global scale, but his idea of giving learners prompts and hints as they reviewed content to personalize the reviewing of that content and make the author closer to the learner, as it might not be in a traditional published course book. Really, I think if he were around today, he'd be very interested in about the potential of adaptive learning to do this in the digital world and adapt itself to make the learning outcomes more specific to the learner and their specific needs. So if you'd like to read a little bit more about this, the main article I used was a great article by Forbes, and the rest is some wider reading if you're interested in looking about adaptive learning and its potential projection into the future. Thank you for joining me, and let's see what it holds for us in the future and instruction.